The state of the housing market. I was looking at taking some Illinois counties and we're tracking fraud across the country. This is the Center Square Daily for Monday, February 9th, 2026. I'm your host, Chris Krug, standing in for Greg Bishop today. Let's start with the housing market. I spoke with Ph.D. economist Orphe Divounguy this morning, and here's part of our conversation. So then let's talk about the housing market. Obviously, you spent a ton of time on that. From your recent writing, you had noted that existing home sales, quote, bounced along the bottom, end quote, throughout 2025. 2026, I mean, this is the day after the Super Bowl. Congratulations to all our friends who like the Seattle Seahawks. You were very, very happy yesterday and still probably very happy today. But the Super Bowl is typically the kickoff. The Super Bowl weekend is typically the kickoff to the U.S. real estate market. That's what I've been told by my realtor friends anyway. What do you anticipate? I mean, you note that there is some affordability improvement being seen. So let's talk about what that means and then what you see for housing, at least early on this year.
Look, the reality is it's still very, very, very difficult for most people, right? When you compare to where we were just a few years ago, home values have increased a lot. Mortgage rates are hovering around 6%, so much higher, two, three times higher, at least twice as high as they were in 2021. So the overall housing cost, right? Insurance cost, all that stuff, maintenance cost, the plumber, right? Everything has gone up. Okay, so housing costs are high, right? Let's start with that. Now, the good news is over the past year, affordability has improved roughly 5% or so, right? The cost has declined. The typical mortgage payment has declined by about 5% or so. That combined with increased incomes increased roughly 3.5% over the past year. That's actually helped improve housing affordability.
Sure. People have a little more room.
They have a little bit more room for sure. And so as a result, when you have a little bit more room, you expect what you would expect, at least what the economic models tell us, is that you would get a small increase in transactions, the number of transactions in the housing market, right? So people coming on the market and sales, right? So new listings and sales. And you would also get potentially a little bit of upward price movement, right? Okay. Remember, over the past year, prices have been basically flat. They haven't increased very much. But we expect to see sales, activity, and prices to start moving up again in 2026. Now, That's the forecast. Okay. There is a big issue, though, with the forecast. And it's, will we resolve this current crisis of confidence? Could people feel secure enough about their future, their employment prospects, that they and the strength of the labor market to start making those long-term, those big decisions, like buying a house, right? And so that is really the kind of constraint, right, or the downside risk to the forecast that I just highlighted.
Confidence plays such a huge part in what's next for the housing market as we make our way into 2026. And I invite you to take a look at this week's Everyday Economics and Orphe's thoughts on that. Economic challenges are certainly hitting the United States as a whole, but some states have been hit harder than others, and you can count Illinois among them. Those economic challenges in Illinois are one of the reasons why some people don't want to be part of Illinois anymore. I'd like to welcome to the show Jim Talamonit, who reports on Illinois from the city of Chicago. Jim, welcome.
Thanks so much, Chris. Good to be here.
It's great to be with you, and I appreciate your efforts in the field and your thoughts on the work that you've been doing. Earlier today, I believe we moved a story across the Center Square Wire regarding this new push among counties on the western side of the state of Illinois who may be flirting with the idea of seceding from the state and moving into Iowa. Can you give us a little bit of update on that.
Yeah, Chris, this is a new twist. And as we've reported at thecentersquare.com, last year there was more of a push from counties bordering Indiana. And a piece of legislation moved through the Indiana legislature and passed both chambers that would create the Indiana-Illinois Boundary Adjustment Act, or the Boundary Adjustment Commission. So a commission to study this potential move of counties bordering, or not even necessarily bordering, but near Indiana, into Indiana, adjusting the state lines, or moving those boundaries west in further deeper into Illinois so that Indiana could incorporate more of the land of Lincoln. Now we have a piece of legislation in the Iowa state legislature that would allow for that would study the potential transfer of one or more Illinois counties bordering Iowa into Iowa. This is House File 2141, proposed by State Rep Taylor Collins of Mediapolis. So he's in Des Moines County, but not far from the state line, basically straight north of Burlington. So in one of those areas of Iowa that could look to push farther east and take over more of Illinois, where, again, 33 counties have voted in some way or another, not necessarily secession, but as we've reported at the Center Square, 33 counties have voted in a measure to either split Illinois so that counties could get away from Chicago and Cook County, or to outright leave the state, most of those being rural counties, also one Metro East County. So this piece of legislation, if it were to pass, the Iowa State Legislature would require a meeting no later than September 1st of this year to start moving on this committee on a potential look at the changing of the state line between, we always think of the Mississippi River, that's your border. Well, that could change if this were to actually eventually happen. It's a long process, but it's in the works in Iowa.
Yeah, and this isn't the first proposal that's come down the pipe as far as it goes. I mean, Indiana and the border counties on the Indiana side of Illinois have looked at this. It seems to me that has gone on for years at this point. What is the latest on the Chicago Bears and their, flirting with the idea of moving to either Gary specifically or into Northwest Indiana in general? I mean, of course, I think it was pretty well publicized news and information that the Bears were looking to leave the city of Chicago, but were perhaps headed to the northwest suburbs and Arlington Heights. They acquired the property related, or that the Arlington International Race Course, a horse track, used to sit on. They still own that. The Bears own that. But now Indiana is very much in the mix. What's driving that?
It's as Governor Mike Braun said in his State of the State address in Indiana last month, he brought this into the conversation. He says the Chicago Bears recognize that Indiana, we have a great climate for business. We're friendly to business. And there's been much criticism of moves by the Illinois General Assembly especially, and also Governor J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, for not having the most business-friendly environment. And so legislation, like I said, actually moved through the legislature to create this boundary commission. And now with regard to the Bears, Governor Pritzker was asked about this just this morning, and he had an event in Belleville, and he said we're making progress. He did not go into details, but in terms of the progress with the Chicago Bears. But there's been some real nervousness in the last few weeks from specifically Arlington Heights village officials that this could be a problem. The Bears have this land. It's been widely assumed if something didn't happen along Chicago's lakefront that the team would at least stay in Illinois. It's in the team's fight song, the pride and joy of Illinois, the
right.
Chicago Bears. And so, but there is some real nervousness. The Arlington Heights officials really pushing the state legislature to do something. Governor Pritzker saying, well, this is more of a local government issue. The governor says we're having conversations. We've been having conversations the last year and a half. We're making progress. Again, no specifics are coming out really from either side. And I've reached out to members of the Indiana legislature in both parties, and we have not been able to get any kind of real detail in terms of what specifically is going on. It seems like everyone's trying to keep things as much as possible behind closed doors, maybe to avoid additional speculation. But you can tell that there's been some nervousness from Arlington Heights officials and some excitement, on the other hand, for Governor Braun to bring it up in his State of the State address that means it's not just, I don't think he would have done that if it were just something cavalier.
No, I wouldn't think at this point. No, I mean, and the issues that exist here, Jim, as you understand them, I mean, would be, because this is not simply in either one of these cases, what's arisen in Gary in Northwest Indiana, or what, is in play potentially for Arlington Heights. They're talking about an entire stadium district being built around the actual football stadium and building, nightlife, restaurants, places to stay, things to do. So both of these proposals are significant and go well beyond simply constructing an appropriate stadium for a National Football League team.
Absolutely. And the Governor Pritzker has said, infrastructure, some of the infrastructure needed for a Bears stadium in Arlington, that's needed anyway. We're ready to fund that. We're ready to finance that. We're not going to build a stadium, he says. But Indiana, one of the things the Bears are really looking for is some kind of property tax relief. As things stand right now, the Bears would pay a massive percentage higher than other professional sports teams in Chicago or really around the country. The Chicago White Sox essentially pay nothing. The Cubs don't pay a whole lot, but the Bears bill, as things stand right now, with Arlington Heights and state regulations being what they are, they would just pay astronomical amounts of money. So if the Bears are saying if some kind of property tax relief doesn't happen, we can't do this. And of course, Indiana is ready to come with a package that would be likely sweeter than anything Illinois would do, but perhaps so sweet that even as much as the Bears might say they want to stay in Illinois, it just becomes too hard to pass up. And again, we haven't seen specifics at all yet from Indiana, but undoubtedly, their Indiana officials seem to be moving to put things together.
Well, there's a lot there. And I mean, obviously, the pressure on both the Indiana side and the Iowa side now, simply on what the state of Illinois looks like today versus what it might look like in the not so distant future. And the Chicago Bears are an important part of the city of Chicago, certainly. Really appreciate your time today, Jim. Great to have you, and thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Fraud has been in the news a lot lately, and the Center Square investigative team has found this problem simply isn't just in Minnesota. We have been looking at fraud from across the country, and let's take a look at something new that we've discovered.
We are creating a new assistant attorney general position who will have nationwide jurisdiction over the issue of fraud. Now, of course, that person's efforts will start and focus primarily in Minnesota, but it is going to be a nationwide effort because, unfortunately, the American people have been defrauded in a very nationwide way.
Since 2020, fraudsters have taken at least $36 billion and as much as $3 trillion in tax money from federal entitlement programs. That amount dwarfs the money federal prosecutors claim was stolen in Minnesota's federal food aid scandal known as Feeding Our Future. An investigation by the Center Square found this fraud stretches far beyond one state. Public safety net programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid lost billions of dollars to scams each year. The amount ranged from $2.7 billion in 2022 to $14.5 billion in 2025.
324 defendants were charged criminally, including 96 licensed medical professionals, 25 of whom were doctors and charged for their alleged participation in various fraud schemes targeting government and private health insurance programs. Over $14 billion in alleged fraud was billed to Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance programs. Unfortunately, those numbers represent Americans impacted in every state.
When you look at nationwide, just the prosecutions from the DOJ, you're talking about hundreds of billions and maybe as much as $3 trillion worth of fraud in the last 4 or 5 years from people basically defrauding entitlement programs. It really raises the question of what the federal and state governments are doing to mitigate that, to police that, and to stop that, because that is a huge theft of taxpayer money that we may never see come back. With the amount of fraud that we found, you're talking about, I think we have a $2 trillion deficit every year. That may be able to be retired by the amount of fraud, maybe even cut into the debt if we cut back on these programs and release the fraud.
From 2020 to 2024, healthcare fraud offenses increased by nearly 20%.
The scam artist gets a bunch of money, taxpayers get burned, and people who would get the entitlements or get the benefits may not get them. And so you're talking about a really insidious type of thing, and that's why they're being prosecuted. And some of them are getting pretty substantial sentences, 20, 30 years in prison, which is justifiable if they're proven guilty of doing this kind of stuff to society.
Be sure to join the Center Square Daily each weekday for more stories impacting you, the American taxpayer, from across the country, only with the Center Square Daily.